IReal Pro is a fantastic application. It's really good for practice and it's also really good for performing. Now, don't expect any of the sounds to really knock you out. Of course, it's just really a practice app, but actually I know a lot of people who use this for gigging, and if you set it right, if you use the right sort of sounds and you're adept with the mixer, actually you can get something really good. Now, there are a few other things which are really handy with this. Things like an intro or coda, so that you want the thing to end with a sort of classic sort of jazz ending rather than just it ending on the beginning of the next sequence, as it were. So what I've got here is my phone with All of Me on it, famous jazz standard, and at the end you can see that I've put a little ending. I've put a coda there. Now I'm going to explain that in a minute, but first of all I'm going to put an intro here, because if I press play at the moment, what happens is this. So I get that 2-bar count in, and then you've got your tune. So if you're doing a gig somewhere and you've got the count in like that, I can understand a drummer going 1, 2, 1, 2, but it's just a click and it's a little bit, not sure about that. So we're going to go into edit mode. So it's the pencil at the top. Now, this is the same as an iPad, another iOS device. On Android, it'll just be laid out slightly differently, but the concept is exactly the same. So I'm going to go to edit mode. Now, at the moment, the cursor gives me the beginning of my chord sequence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold on that cursor until you see this blue sort of shaded bit come out. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it for the full 8 bars there. And I'm actually going to insert space. What that does is it gives me something at the beginning. Now, this is where the little letter, the rehearsal letters come into play, because if I now click on the A at the bottom here, I'm going to use in, which means intro. So basically what that means is that I can type an intro in. Let's have a F6, F minor 6, and there is my sequence. So I've just tapped that first 8 bars in. Now what happens is that the phone, the application recognises that this is an intro only. So when it goes round the sequence, the normal verse sequence, it won't include the intro at all, apart from at the very start, which is obviously what you want. So if I now go, there we go, 3 times through, this means that you can now get rid of your metronome. So if I I'll just duration 0, so there's no counting at all. So if I just go back to my main page, it'll now just simply play back from the beginning, and then I can sort of noodle a bit before then coming in. Now what's going to happen is I will make the video actually sort of fade out and come back in, so that you can see at the beginning of the second time it doesn't play that intro. And there we go. At the end of the first go, it didn't play the intro. So that's that little bit dealt with. Now, of course, if you decide, well, actually, I don't want the intro today, that's fine. Because actually what you can do is we can reinstate the counting. Let's have 2-bar counting. What you can do is you can click and hold. So you're not in edit mode anymore, you're in play mode. You can click and hold, and then the play button appears. So actually now when you press play, it'll simply give you your click, and away you go. Etc, etc. Now, at the end, a jazz sequence usually is just your 16 or 32 bar sequence, which will then just repeat itself, and at the end, by default, it will simply play through the entire sequence and end at the beginning of the next go, as it were. It'll just put an ending chord. Now that's kind of not really natural. So what I've done with this is to actually edit out or rather edit a coda section in. Now I'm just going to go into edit mode and I'm going to describe this with the aid of what I've just done here. At the moment, the sequence ends on the third line up. So D minor 7, G7, and then it goes back to the beginning of your sequence. But what I've done is I've put a coda in here. So where the cursor is, there we go, where the cursor is now flashing, we have a button at the bottom, which gives you some various options. Like you can do a pause or a dal segno back to the sign, or you've got a coda, or indeed you can end the tune. That's quite handy. And you can see end at the bottom there, which I'm going to go through in a minute. Now, what you do is, if you want to make it go somewhere else for the last go, you have to put the coda on beat 4, as you can see here. Then you can just tap in another sequence, which begins at where the cursor now is, and you add a second coda symbol. If I just do that, you can see that the coda symbol has gone, so I just need to reinstate that. Now, that basically means that I can... it'll play back the D minor 7, the G7, then it will go to the very last bit, and I've actually opted for a break, you know, the sort of wanna take all of me, that kind of thing. Now, you can't make it do specific rhythms like that, but you can actually make it end on a single chord. And actually at the bottom we've got that end word. Now that is in the same box as the coda. We've got our ending, and as you can see it's lit in blue, which means that it's active. If I click on it, it'll just, what the player will actually do is keep going on the C and then just end on the next bar. For some reason there's a different time signature there, I'm not really sure why, but it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to click that end there, which means that now when I opt to play back, now when you're testing this, obviously this is going to be a little bit of a hassle, but if you set it to play once, it means that it will play essentially the last time. So what I'll do is I will play again, and you can see that it navigates to the correct place. And there you go. If you do a little arpeggio at the other end, at the end, it doesn't kind of matter really, because the musician is delivering the ending. The fact that the backing track has stopped, that's of very little consequence. So there are masses of things you can do with this, and actually the thing is very clever. It recognises all sorts of things. You have things like repeat marks. So if I go into the edit mode, for example, if I wanted to, well, I just repeated the E minor 7 bar, which I wouldn't want to do because then I end up with a 9-bar sequence, you can just click and introduce a repeat mark like that. By default, it will repeat once. However, if I go into the edit window, ABC, and opt to play it back 5 times, okay, wonder what that will sound like. Well, you'll hear the fact that you can put these things in. So if I just go back to the start and press play, so I suppose you can do a gig where you introduce an old school record that's maybe got a scratch on it, perhaps. So we can get rid of that, certainly. Now, lots of there've been a few questions about iReal Pro. I put a video up about how to sort of basically use it, and somebody said, well, it's all the chords are bunched up, and actually that's something else you can do with this. If I wanted something, maybe if I had a chord every bar in the penultimate, in the last bar of the intro, perhaps I want to have some substitutions, perhaps. This is where you can actually go and find your small type. If I click the S button at the bottom left, it makes that D minor 7 really small. And in fact, it makes everything after it small. So you can reinstate it with a normal N for normal size. So if I maybe have A flat 7, There we go. It's just a little bit laggy. A flat 7. You can see that these things now fit in the bar. G7 flat 9. Let's have a D flat major 7. Let's just substitute that. Major 7. Like that. Now, of course, it's going to have problems fitting all of these different extensions, and you can't really expect it to do that. Now, when I go to C, I can then establish that I want a normal font size. So I've got N, S for small, N for normal. Now, when you come out of edit mode, you don't see these little blue letters. It just simply gives you your layout as you would like to see it. So that means that the end of the intro will now play those 4 chords. So here we are. I'll play you out with this.